Hi, hello. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sydney, and I'm so excited that you decided to click on this video, wherever it may find you today. So, today we are going to dive into the pros and cons of the different methods of reading that we all tend to engage in the most. And so that would be physical paper books, electronic books, and audiobooks. So, these are really the most common. The oldest is just oral rendition, where you have somebody who walks through the town, tells stories, all of those things. So that's a little bit about that. And we're just going to go ahead and dive on in to all of these. Let's get it going. Okay, so we will start with tradition. We have the print. And this is arguably probably one of my favorite ways to read books, though it is not the fastest way for me to read books. There's just something nostalgic about opening the book, turning the page, the feel, the smell. It engages more of your senses, and I absolutely love that with my physical stories. So that's probably the biggest pro for me. The and the next couple kind of go together, where I believe that with the physical stories, my retention of the content is drastically improved. I feel like I can retain the words and what happens in the plot and the characters a lot better when I physically read the story versus on my Kindle or on Audible. So that's another big perk. And part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that this forces me to slow down because I'm not as distracted by notifications on my phone or playing a game on my iPad. And then obviously there's the harmful effects of blue light if you have too much of that. And of course, we're all on screens all day, every day. And so the physical books help get me away from all of that. And so that also helps with the retention. And those are some major pros where less distraction, you can get away from blue light and screens and just enjoy a quiet, slowed down pace when you're physically reading a book. With that, they are also easier to annotate, which again, I believe helps with retention. So you can be sitting here and tab it, and then I've got my little annotating notes here. So I've got my little color coded tabs, I've got my quotes, my passages, my like impact, emotional flag, and then my just general information. If I'm like, I feel like this needs to be flagged, but it's not necessarily like a specific quote, passage, that kind of thing. And then I've got my book friendly highlighter and my permanent marker, fine tip, obviously, of course. So these are what I use to annotate, and this one just makes it a lot easier. And with that, it's also, the physical books are something that you can pass down through generations. So one of the big things that I'm currently doing is collecting classics and reading them, because for a multitude of reasons. One, to be able to annotate them so that when my kids or my grandchildren or my great grandchildren go through this book that hopefully can get passed down generation to generation, they can go through and be like, oh, grandma said XYZ and thought this about this spot. That's insightful. I'm going to add my own little notes because I see this part being more meaningful. And it can just become a treasured family possession that you can pass down from generation to generation. And that's one of the big things about it, is once you have the print copy, it can't be edited. You don't have to worry about a license getting revoked or something getting changed, and like you can do with the electronic versions. And that's a major pro for these. And with that, when you're all is said and done, you've got a beautiful trophy on your shelf to admire. And I don't really like calling them trophies because that just sounds like, oh, look at me, look at what I accomplished. Like a lot of my books, they're not in the viewing space of my home. They're in a spare bedroom that we have, so that I can go and be like, and just like reminisce on the books that I've read and just like look at them and be like, I really enjoyed that world. I love that story. I really want to dive into this one. I want to go back to that world. That one was fun. I want to go back to that and feel all the feelings and see the characters that I love again. So those are a lot of the really big pros for physical reading. And it might, like, yes, with like this type of a novel, I'm not going to be sitting here holding it. I'm going to set it on my desk, go to my page, and let it be open on the tabletop, because it is a very, very dense book. It's probably about a almost 5 pound book on its own. But there's something about holding a book and reading and turning the page that brings joy. So even though there's a lot of pros, in my opinion, for physically reading books, there's also some cons. Nothing is perfect. The only thing that in this world that is perfect is Jesus himself. So there are some cons with these. One being they are typically more expensive. If you're like me, I prefer buying my books at a bookstore. So, and when I go to a bookstore, typically I will also stop and get like a matcha or a coffee, and then I'll peruse. And even if I'm going in there just for one book, I usually come out with like 3 or 4. So I end up spending more money. It definitely leads to impulse shopping when I go to a bookstore, which is why I'm trying to prioritize used bookstores. So that's a little less damaging to the bank account. Uh, but that they are rather expensive if you want to purchase them. One of the other pros of these is there's a library. If you cannot afford them to purchase the physical copy, see if your local library has it. Find a free little library in one of the neighborhoods and use that. It is a very valuable resource. I love the library. That's where I get most of my audiobooks from, to be honest. And that way, especially if it's a book that, say, you're like, I really want to read Jade City, but I don't know if I'll like it enough to spend my own money on it. See if your library has it. And if it does, rent it. If you're absolutely loving it, then you can go and buy your own copy of it as well. So don't sleep on libraries. That's another pro. If you don't want to go to the bookstore, go to your local library. Get a library card and enjoy it there. Another con, though, of physical books is they can be a lot less convenient to take with you. Trying to fit this in my purse with my wallet and my phone and my keys and lug it around is going to be a lot more daunting than just popping my iPad in and taking this with me, because this is also my journal and my planner and all of the things. So that's a lot easier to take than this, plus everything that comes with it. So that is another con. These, if you have a small book, like I have some books that are really small, either thin or just compact, that are really easy to pop in your purse and take with you. But not every physical book is like that. So that can be a con and a hindrance if you want to go read at the park or at a local coffee shop or even at the bookstore. A lot of bookstores have like little sitting areas where you can go and read. So another con of these, specifically, I'm talking to my married people, my people that live in like a dorm room or like share a room in some sense. Because these don't have the backlight like the e-readers do, you need a light source. And that can be disruptive to those people that you are sharing a room with. There are the targeted ones. I have some of them. Absolutely love my book lights, but it can make it a little bit more difficult for them to fall asleep, especially if they don't have like the eye mask or anything like that to help block out the extra light. And so that then you like, it's harder for you to be able to read in bed and all of those things. So that can be a con if you share a room with somebody who's a very light sleeper or very sensitive to that kind of thing and you're trying to read at night. Where if you're in a dorm, you would kind of have to go to like the community space, or you'd have to go to the living room if you're in a house or an apartment. And if you want to read in bed, like, sorry, like, it's just one of those things that you'd have to work out with the person. And then when you travel, similar to when you want to go to the bookstore, if you only have physical books, it can be really, really difficult to determine how many books you need to take. You basically have to become a mathematician and do algebraic equations, because it's how many pages do I read on average per hour? How many hours are going to be spent doing things? How many hours am I going to have to actually read a book? Which equals to how many pages can I get done? Which means I need to bring this many books that equal this number of pages. And typically you're going to be wrong. You're either going to have way too many or you're not going to have nearly enough. And that can be a con with the physical. And then another con is they're just heavy. They got weight to them. Each book is probably at least half a pound to a pound, and when you put 30 of them in a box, the box gets rather heavy and bulky. And so they can be very obnoxious to move. And so that's something that I'm definitely taking into account this year with my book buying is, do I want to move this? Because I know I'm going to have to. And so just keep that in mind when you are looking at physical books. Those are definitely, that can definitely be a con. There are definitely cons to this. All right. So now that we have talked about the physical versions of books, let's move into the electronic. So I'm going to open up my iPad real quick, and I've just got this library of stories that I can read. Some of them I would have to purchase, some of them are on Kindle Unlimited, but I've just got a plethora of books in here. And that is probably one of the biggest pros to this. So like when I go on vacation in March, I can read some more James Islington. I can read some T. King Fisher, some Bo Savage, like so many books that if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can read for essentially free. And then it's also typically going to be a little bit cheaper if you want to get the electronic version of a book versus the behemoth of a physical I've got over here. So that's one thing to keep in mind as a very much a pro for electronic books. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, that this is just so convenient. Like my plan when I go to the beach in March, I have a very fun physical book that I'm going to take, but that's probably going to be the only physical book that I take with me. And then I will read the rest from my iPad. So that's one of the biggest things, is this is just so convenient. You have access to so many stories, and it's easy to take with you everywhere, and it's one fairly small or lightweight item instead of having to pack multiple books or really heavy books. It can also make reading a little bit more accessible to people that have vision impairments. Not necessarily those who are completely blind, but those that might need a little bit of a larger font or a little bit less of a scripted font that is very much more straight lined and thicker or thinner, whatever your vision needs are. This can make things a lot more accessible if you have issues with like the bright lights, that kind of thing. It's a lot more personalized. You can personalize it a lot better. Personalizable. It's more personalizable. Is that even a word? I don't think it is. Anyways, yeah, these are the thoughts in my head. So, yeah, that's one of the big pros of it, is the accessibility. And then you can also control the light and on the screen. So if you are sharing a room with somebody, you can very much just dim your light enough to where like you can read it, but it's not blasted or reflected everywhere in the room. So you're not disrupting somebody who you might be sharing a room or a bed with. And that is a very much a large pro of it. And again, it is typically more affordable for books, especially if you have like a Kindle Unlimited subscription. So I could read for $12 a month hundreds of different stories. I can read a ton of thrillers. Almost every Freedom McFadden is on KU. So you can read pretty much all of them. There's a couple of Alice Feeney's. There's different fantasies. There's a ton of options on there. And then even if you have to purchase the book itself, it's typically about $10 or $12 for the book versus 20. And so that can save you a little bit of money as well with that. Some of the cons, if you want to get a tablet, you don't just want the app on your phone, it is going to be at least about $100 for the device, whether it's a Nook, a Kindle, a Kobo. If you go with the iPad route, that's going to be even more expensive usually. And the reason I have the iPad app instead of an actual Kindle is because I got my iPad before I got into reading. And so that was just a lot easier and made a lot more sense for me to just get the app on my iPad, which because I already have it, even though it is a lot more difficult to hold than a regular Kindle. If you don't have an iPad, I would recommend probably just getting the Kindle because those are a lot easier and smaller and cheaper to carry around. So, on another con on some of these platforms, you are paying for a license. And with that license, they have the right to edit the story at any time, revoke that license, take it off of their platform, and you can't really do anything about it. So, that's one of the major cons. When you have a print book, no one is coming into my house, taking this book, changing it, and then giving it back to me. But with these, technically they can. I'm not saying that they have or that they will, just that they could. And so that is a risk that you can run with the electronic books. Another con, in my opinion, just because I love the idea of having books and a library, and I grew up with books basically being everywhere, is you don't have that physical book to look at on your shelf. You can go into your Kindle and you can see it and all of those things, but it's if you absolutely love a book and you want the physical version, then you have to spend additional money to get that hard copy of it. So that is another potential con of the electronic books. Okay, so finally, we are going to get into probably the most controversial method of reading, and that's audiobooks. So, I'm a big fan of audiobooks, especially when I was working in an office. I would listen to audiobooks all the time instead of music and those kinds of things at my desk. I just loved I love them. They are a great way to be able to consume the bookish content that you want. I would listen to it on my drive to work. I would listen to it at lunch, on my way home. I listen to audiobooks at the gym usually instead of music. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. Now, there's definitely, this one probably has the most pros and the most cons. So, pros, it allows you to multitask. I know friends who have multiple kids where the only way that they can really get true reading in is either while they're nursing their baby in the middle of the night or listening to an audiobook while they're doing their household duties. So, if your brain can handle it, you are able to multitask with audiobooks and get things done so you can still enjoy the books that you want to read. It can also make reading accessible to those with vision impairments. I have an uncle who has since passed who was completely blind. And so the only way that he could read a book is if he listened to it, because finding books in Braille is almost impossible with that. So he would listen to his books. And that's the only way he could read because he could not see. So anyone telling me that audiobooks don't count as reading, tell that to a blind person who physically cannot read. And then try again. It's like, okay. Your ableism is showing. So one of my favorite parts of audiobooks is you hear how words are meant to be pronounced and sometimes the inflection or the tone in which the author intended things, similar to if I'm on the phone with my husband and he makes a joke versus when I am texting my husband and he makes a joke. When I'm on the phone with him or in front of him, I probably can tell he's kidding, it's a joke, it's not serious. Through text, I might completely misinterpret it, think he's upset about something, or take it completely out of context. And thankfully, authors are usually pretty good about making it obvious of how it should sound. But when you have someone actually physically doing it, it can help it click. And that just can provide an overall well-rounded experience with that. So I'm a big fan of audiobooks. Just listening to a book does count as reading. I will die on that hill. I've said it before. I'll say it again until I'm blue in the face. Audiobooks count. Same content, different mode. Okay? So audiobooks count. Try again if you say that they don't. But they do have some cons. I will acknowledge that. They have cons. I've even with myself, my retention of stories is lower when it comes to audiobooks. I don't remember them as well as I do when I physically read them, both on my Kindle and in my print editions. And yes, you can also zone out with physical books. I've done it before, but I tend to zone out more and miss larger chunks when I'm listening to it. If I zone out on like a physical book or on an ebook, it's usually only for about a paragraph, and I can just reread that paragraph real quick and it's fine. I tend to miss a little bit more when I am listening to audiobooks. And a part of that is of my own doing, because I would just try to this it goes back to if you watched one of my other videos where I talk about how I basically treated reading as a sport and I had to do better and bigger number better person. I would just speed through books. If I couldn't listen to it at 2x speed, I didn't want to listen to it, because then it's going to take me forever to get through it, and I don't want to do that. I don't have the time. And one thing that I've learned is to slow down, which is really helping. I also take notes during my listening for audiobooks so that I can retain them better. So that is another big thing when it comes to audiobooks, is the zoning out and having to backtrack and all of that. Another one that people don't really think about is the potential damage to your ears and your hearing. If you have it at a high volume, if you have AirPods or headphones in all day, every day, that persistent use is going to cause damage at some point. And so just keep that in mind when you are listening to your audiobooks. With the over the ear, you're less likely to damage your physical ear, but your hearing, if it's at a certain volume, can be damaged as well with persistent high volume use of over the ears. And again, there's no trophy at the end unless you go buy the physical print copy. And I like having the physical print copy, which is why typically I do prefer my physical books. And another pro of audiobooks is immersive reading. If you've never tried it, I highly recommend immersive reading, where I'm currently doing it with Pride and Prejudice just because of the old English language, where I will have my headphones in and the narrator will be reading it to me, and I put it at the speed of what I am physically able to read it as well. And I'll basically read it along with them and then make my notes, pause it as I need it. And so that is a pro of the audiobook, is immersive reading. I love immersive reading. My husband thinks it's psychotic. I'm a fan, and that's all that matters. But there are cons. And just like with everything in life, there are pros and cons. All right, everybody, there you have it. Pros and cons of the 3 common methods of reading. We all have our preferences. I definitely prefer physical books, but I also have a soft spot for audiobooks. And so let me know in the comments below which method you prefer of reading. If you liked what I had to say, don't forget to like the video. And if you want to see more or hear more from me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit that little notification bell up there. And I'll see y'all in the next one. I love you all. Have a blessed rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye.